The night I met her, the rain was falling like it wanted to wash the city of its sins, and I was standing alone in my father's old house, staring at debts that felt heavier than the walls themselves. His death had left me with ledgers full of red numbers, unpaid loans, and a silence that rang louder than any argument we ever had. I had just finished locking away the last reminder of his failures when the doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected, cutting through the storm like fate knocking without permission. Before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of compassion, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from, because stories like this connect hearts across the world. She stood at the door soaked from the rain, clutching a worn leather bag to her chest as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her name was Emily Carter, and her eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting battles no one else sees. She explained, in a trembling but determined way, that she had come to repay her father's debt. Her father had borrowed money from mine years ago, back when both men believed tomorrow would always be kinder than today. He had died suddenly, leaving her with nothing but responsibility and shame she did not deserve. She had sold her mother's jewelry, worked double shifts at a bakery, and walked miles in the rain just to stand at my door with an envelope that barely covered a fraction of what was owed. I watched her hands shake as she offered it, and something inside me broke open. I saw not a debtor, but a daughter carrying a burden far too heavy for her fragile frame. My father had been a hard man, strict and proud, obsessed with numbers and repayments, believing mercy was weakness. I had inherited his house and his debts, but standing there, looking at Emily, I realized I did not have to inherit his cruelty. I told her that the money was not necessary, that debts written on paper mattered less than the ones written on human hearts. Then, almost without thinking, I asked her if she would like to stay, at least until the storm passed. The house had been empty for months, its rooms echoing with memories and regret. Emily moved through it quietly, as if afraid to disturb ghosts. Over the next few days, she stayed, first out of necessity, then out of mutual understanding. She helped clean the dust-covered shelves, cooked simple meals from whatever we had, and listened when the silence between us grew heavy. I learned that she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, that life had interrupted her plans with illness, loss, and responsibility. She learned that I was struggling too, trapped between honoring my father's legacy and finding my own way forward. But life does not allow peace without testing it. Rumors spread quickly in a small town. People whispered about the strange arrangement, about debts forgiven and favors exchanged. Creditors began knocking, demanding payments I could not make. The bakery where Emily worked cut her hours, leaving her anxious and ashamed, believing she had become a burden again. I watched her retreat into herself, apologizing for things that were never her fault, offering to leave so she would not cause more trouble. Those nights were the hardest. The weight of my father's debts pressed down on me, threatening to crush whatever kindness I had tried to build. I considered selling the house, giving up, walking away from everything that tied me to this pain. Emily, sensing the tension, worked even harder, waking early to help neighbors, tutoring children for free, slowly becoming a quiet presence of warmth in a town that had forgotten how to be gentle. Change came unexpectedly, as it often does. One of the children Emily helped was the daughter of a local council member, a man known for his influence and rigid morals. He noticed the difference in his child, her newfound confidence and love for learning, and asked about the woman who had helped her. Stories began to shift. Whispers turned into respect. Opportunities followed. Emily was offered a permanent teaching position at the local community center, modest but meaningful. I found buyers interested in restoring my father's abandoned warehouse, turning it into something useful instead of letting it rot as a monument to pride. As weeks turned into months, the house no longer felt empty. Laughter returned to its halls, not loud or forced, but gentle and real. Emily repaid her father's debt not with money, but with kindness that healed wounds far deeper than numbers ever could. And I repaid my father's legacy by choosing compassion over cold calculation, understanding that true wealth lies in the lives we uplift. Just before this story reaches its end, I want to ask you something special. Please comment below and tell us what this story made you feel, because your words matter more than you know. On the day Emily finally moved into her own small apartment, the sun shone brighter than it had in years. We stood in the doorway of the house that had changed both our lives, no longer as strangers bound by debt, but as two souls who had found redemption through each other's pain. I realized then that asking her to stay had not been an act of charity, but an act of survival for us both. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe even a little more in humanity, kindness, and second chances, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. And remember, sometimes the greatest debts are repaid not with money, but with love, courage, and the simple decision to let someone stay.